Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show, and with me right now I've got a very special guest. If you've ever been a fan of Memphis Wrestling or watched Memphis Wrestling back in the day, you might recognize our guest today. He has been inducted into the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame and has worked in broadcasting for several years. Pleased to welcome the one and only Michael St. John. Michael, welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
You act like I'm a star. I mean, thank you for the opportunity, but I appreciate the opportunity. I know you guys do a fantastic job with the podcast you do and the services that you do. And when I got your note that I wanted to know if I wanted to be on, there was no thinking about it. It was like, heck yeah, in a heartbeat. So here I am.
Yes, I'm glad we could make this happen. So talk to me about your childhood. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Huntsville, Alabama. I was born there a long, long time ago. And most people know my age, so I really don't have to cover it up. I'm younger than Jim Ross. But other than that, I was born in Huntsville. My father worked for the Huntsville Times newspaper for 43 years. My mother worked in a jewelry store. I have a sister that is 7 years younger than me. She stole my birthday. She's born on the same day that I was, 7 years after I was. And that always was a bone of contention and sometimes still is. But otherwise, was raised, went to parochial school as a child, graduated from Huntsville High School, one of 9 students at the graduating class that were enrolled at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. Got a degree in psychology with a minor in English. There were 8 other folks from our high school that went to Vanderbilt. They became doctors, and one guy bought a radio station and got into professional wrestling as a sideline. So that's a synopsis of where I started. After that, my radio career, I worked in college radio. I actually got a job here at Way Radio. I was a cashier at Bruno's Supermarket. The owner of WAAY Radio and TV used to come through my line. I was the guy that was designated to make in-store announcements. So when he heard about those homegrown pineapples in the produce aisle, he offered me the opportunity to get into radio. And within a very short period of time, when I was 15 years old, I actually got on the radio, got to Vanderbilt, ran the Vanderbilt radio station for 4 years. We actually went to an FM frequency while I was doing it from an AM. And after that, went to work for Scott Shannon, who ran WMAK in Nashville while I was in college. They bought WERC in Birmingham. We went down there, and that was his worst to first success. We took a radio station that had been floundering for decades, and from August 1st to from August 1st to November 26th, went from worst in the market to number 1 in the market. After that, I programmed in Memphis and Hartford. Nashville, came back to Nashville in 1977. Programmed Kicks 104, put a new station on the air out in Gallatin, Tennessee, which is now 104.5 The Zone. After that, went over across the street to Y107 and did the same thing. First programmer in America to ever take 2 out-of-market radio stations to number 1 in the top 50 market. And I guess that's my biggest accomplishment to date. From there, went to Phoenix, Arizona, Phoenix to St. Louis to Los Angeles, back to St. Louis, and then bought a radio station here in 1997. And never worked harder, never been happier.
Yeah, talk about such an accomplishment, having such a decorated career, working in all facets of the industry. Did you know at a young age you wanted to be in entertainment?
Well, I knew at a young age I wanted to be on the radio. I was doing homework when I was a freshman in high school, and we had a very small house. It's in a historic area of Huntsville, over in Old Town, and the front bedroom was sort of the office of the house. It was a spare bedroom for guests and so forth. And I used to do my homework in there because it was quiet. And I turned the radio on. This is a great story. You like this? I had a phonograph that had a radio on it. So my record player had a radio on it. So when I'd study, instead of having to change records all the time, I'd listen to the radio. And I was listening to a radio station out of Cleveland, Ohio, and a guy named Jack Armstrong, Big Jack Yolita, was on the radio and screaming and yelling and talking to folks all over the country. And I went, I'd like to do this. And so that's sort of the fire started burning. But I always knew I wanted to do it. I've always said ever since then, I've had 58 wonderful years in broadcasting. And I've always said if there was only one radio station in America, I'd have to get a job there. I'd probably be sweeping the floor, but I'd have to do that. So that's sort of my background on that.
Well, I mean, you move up the ladder in the industry because you're doing all the grunt work, and then eventually the big break comes. You get the on air position. When you cracked that mic for the first time, were you nervous? Were you excited?
A little bit of both. It was funny how I got to do it. I went into after Mr. Smith gave me the opportunity to open the window, if you would, on a Friday night in a grocery store. That following Monday, he told me after school to show up at Way Radio and talk to a gentleman named Glenn Buxton, and he'd give me some kind of job. And I figured it was going to be like a Sunday morning, running the church tapes or cleaning up or doing whatever. Well, this was a Monday. He said, well, come in Saturday night. He said, I'm on the air from 6 to 12, and I'll teach you the controls and let you sort of get your feel for it. Well, I showed up there on Saturday night, and at 6 o'clock, he showed me this turns on the microphone. This is your volume for the music. This is your volume for the mic. These are where your card machines come in. And he said, go ahead and run a break. So I ran the break. He looked at me and he said, I got some things to do at home. I'll see you at midnight. So he left, and that was it. I was on my own. And obviously, they liked what they heard, thank God, because they invited me back. And back then I'll never forget the first job I ever had. I made 90 cents an hour. And that was, hey, they could have paid me a nickel an hour and I'd have still done the job.
Yeah, as someone that's also been in the business, I know you start in the small markets, work your way up, and then eventually start working in the bigger cities. So it's definitely something that you really have to grind at and work at for a long time. But I'd imagine those days, those early days in radio were some of the best.
Well, the foundation was a lot of fun. Coach Saban always says it's the process. It's getting to where you want to get to go, and it was. I mean, there was a lot of long days and long hours, and there still are. But back then, everything was a new challenge, and everything was something that you'd never experienced before. As you grow and go from town to town and radio station from radio station, you learn the pitfalls. You learn what to avoid. You learn what works and what doesn't work. What will work in one town may not work in another. Some of it's trial and error. Much of it is research. And, there are research companies that get hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to do research. And I've always found that the best research to whatever you are doing, whether it's broadcast or wrestling or whatever, is talking to people and getting out and knowing and going into the community and going into the businesses and going into the schools and when I'm standing in line at a fast food store, I'm talking to the person next to me. I can talk to a wall. I mean, I've always had that blessing thanks to my mom's personality, but that's sort of I've always had as I call it, a foot soldier research method. And you learn a lot. You learn a lot from just listening to people.
Do you recall any words of wisdom that you got from your mentors when starting out in the business?
I was very lucky. I had a gentleman named Johnny Randolph who ran Wacky in Louisville. And when I was at Vanderbilt, he and I became friends at a radio clinic that was held there in 1971, I guess it was, over at the old Roger Miller King of the Road, which has, I think, been raised for the new Dome Stadium there. But we were sitting talking. I just luckily got to sit and talk with him. And he allowed me to, on a Friday, my last class was over at 11 o'clock. So I drive to Louisville and sit in on his afternoon programming sessions, whether it be music or whether it be with his DJs or whatever. And that sort of learned at the master's knee, if you would. And then my other mentor is a great guy named Scott Shannon, who is in every Hall of Fame you can name.
Mm-hmm.
We talk quite often, still to this day. And Scott probably gave me the best words of advice, and about trying. I was very impatient. I'm always, let's do it now kind of mentality, which is sort of the mentality of the generation we live in. But I had it way back then, and his best advice to me was time takes time. And I think that's going to be put on the tombstone when I die. Time takes time.
Yeah, you
So,
have to really work at it when you're speaking and you're talking. And I know that's why when you start out in such a small market, you make your mistakes, can kind of get away with it. But when you start moving up, you have to really like know your stuff, like solid.
well, yeah, but again, if you have a lot of good support people, and I've always been blessed, I've always been able to hire people that were very, very good. That when I hate to keep comparing to football, but go ahead, football coach. If you hire a really good assistant, I have my son's a college football coach, but if you hire really good assistants and you hire people that can support and help you out in the goals, and everybody has that common goal and that common thread that we all run off, it makes it a lot easier. Now, to your point, absolutely, you make mistakes. You make mistakes in big. I made some of my biggest mistakes in the biggest markets I ever worked. But
Really?
those things, mistakes come along with it, and being able to overcome those mistakes, or at least getting past those mistakes to a way they don't hurt you more than once. I think a lot of people fall into the pitfall of making the same mistake over and over and over again, and I think that spells for disaster. And I think that was a big thing about my career, and the background in psychology and how to handle people and communicate with people, and a background in English and how to express myself. I think helped a million times along the way.
Was there a mistake you made that in radio that you had learned from and took away from that experience?
Oh, absolutely. There are probably 100 of them. Probably none bigger than the other. Um, there were a couple of situations where I had the opportunity to hire and work with Glenn Beck for a couple of years. And of course, Glenn's one of the best conservative talk show hosts in the world today. And I paired him with a guy named Timmy Hattrick. And I really feel they were probably the best morning team I ever had. But I did not. I didn't take advantage of all the resources that they gave, and probably said no to ideas one time too many. And both of them went on to wonderful and successful careers. They're Hall of Famers in their respective fields as well. And so, I look back and say, well, why didn't I take advantage? Why didn't I take advantage of more of their knowledge? And yeah, but it was an interesting. Phoenix was an over-radioed market when we went in there. We flipped a 100,000 watt FM that had never passed a 3 share. And we left it when we left it had a 6.1. Uh, there was impatience but management. They wanted to do something. They had a turnaround situation in San Diego that had happened a couple of years earlier that happened very quickly because San Diego was under radioed. And a really good friend of mine went in there and took over the programming and flipped it very quickly. And Phoenix was a harder mountain to climb, so to speak. But other than that, there are others. I mean, I could pick out probably three or four others, but I think the thing about it is don't worry about the mistakes. You make a mistake, go play the next play, go on to the next thing, and try to get things over with.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about moving forward, and like you said, trial and error. It's a process. You're growing, you're learning, and it is fun. It's magical. Radio is magic. You go in there, you work with a bunch of people, you process what you're gonna do or talk about if you're doing the on-air stuff, and it really takes a lot of people to put together a radio show and a really incredible radio show. Was wrestling something you had watched growing up as well as we kind of transition?
Oh, absolutely. I began. I loved wrestling longer before. I knew about wrestling and learned about wrestling long before I ever got into broadcasting. I had an uncle that worked at the Huntsville Times. It was my godfather. He was a bachelor, lived with my grandfather at my grandfather's house, and it was a half a block away from the Patton Street Armory in Huntsville, Alabama, where on Friday night Nick Goulas and Roy Welch would promote wrestling. And we owned some apartments that were just on the back side of the armory. It was in a National Guard armory, and it had the big windows and everything. And on a Friday night, if Uncle John couldn't afford to pay to get into the matches, we'd go up there and sit on a stool and watch the matches from the apartment building. Of course, you didn't have the same ambience that you had inside, but the first time he ever took me into that Armory Live, I almost choked to death from cigarette smoke and cigar smoke. So that was an experience in its own. But Huntsville was an interesting market back in the 60s in that we were precursors to what cable television was. A gentleman put up that owned a radio station here on WBHP, put up a community antenna up on Montesano Mountain, which is about an 1900 foot mountain on the east side of Huntsville, and put up a tower and started putting up TV antennas, pulling in signals from outside markets. So I would see TV from Chattanooga, Birmingham, Nashville on a daily basis. And sometimes we'd get Channel 13 out of Memphis because Channel 13 in Birmingham was an NBC affiliate, and the affiliates protected each other. So they would black out the signal when the same program was running on two different channels or two different stations. So I got to watch Harry Thornton. I got to watch Jack Gil Green and Smiling Jack Simpson in Nashville at Channel 8. I got to watch the early days of Lance Russell and Dave Brown, Grady Reeves here in Huntsville, and of course the illustrious Sterling Brewer in Birmingham on Channel 42, all because of a community, quote unquote, cable television. And they didn't black out the wrestling matches. I mean, the wrestling shows on a Saturday, you could watch 4 of them or sometimes 5 of them and really get a feel for the business. So that's how I got interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to learn about the history of Tennessee wrestling because it covers so many areas. Who were some of your favorites growing up?
Oh, wow. Jackie Fargo, without a doubt, was, he stole the show, no matter what the show was. I remember he and his brother, Jackie and Sonny Fargo, wrestling, saw him here in Huntsville at the Armory against Don and Luke Fields back in the day. I remember the Welch, Herb and Lester Welch wrestling together. Go back to Don and Al Green. I mean, and Tennessee was a real big tag team town. Or Nick and Roy ran a lot of great tag teams through that area. The Interns, the Medics, Mephisto and Dante, the Blue Infernos, the Mighty Yankees. I mean, there were some outstanding tag teams, and it was a big tag team territory. But Len Rossi was always a favorite of mine. Actually, my grandfather ran a shoe shop here in Huntsville and started in 1913 and down on Washington Street. And he used to do the soles of some of the wrestlers' boots, and they were special soles. And he was a shoemaker. And Len Rossi would come and get his shoes done with my grandfather. So unbeknown to me, going to the wrestling matches until finally the word got out. But that was sort of I always thought Len Rossi and Bearcat Brown were one of the most groundbreaking tag teams in the history of wrestling, and certainly here in the South.
They definitely were because it was unheard of back then to have a white wrestler and a black wrestler team up together and really broke barriers.
Indeed, it did. Originally when Bearcat Brown broke in this area, Dennis Hall brought him to the territory. And Dennis was living in Chattanooga at the time, and I think did some training with Bearcat. And Dennis and Nick Goulas had a falling out, but Nick didn't want to lose Bearcat Brown because he was drawing people from that race to the matches. And anyway, Len Rossi came to him one day, as the story goes, and actually heard this from Nick, and he said Len wanted to team with him, and he said, I went, are you crazy? An Italian white guy with a black man in the racist South? You're going to get us killed. And Len was persistent, and then they formed a great tag team. And of course, you may or may not know the story. And in my opinion, they did more for integration in Birmingham, Alabama than there were 2 events that happened in 1968-69 that turned Birmingham from being a very rough place for people of any color to Caucasian people accepting another race. And the 2 things were Coach Bear Bryant, brought Southern California to play Alabama in 1968 the opening game in '69, rather, at Legion Field, and Southern Cal beat Alabama 42-21. Alabama didn't have any black players, and Southern California had a running back named Sam Bam Cunningham, who ran all over Alabama. And after the game, Coach Bryant said, "We're going to have to recruit people of color," and did. And the Alabama fan base accepted it immediately because they just got their tails stomped by something they couldn't compete with. So that was number one. And then the second incident happened on Channel 42 television on a Saturday night at 10:30, when the interns and Ken Ramey painted Bearcat Brown white on television, on the wrestling show, painted him with white paint. They used the ether, put Lynn to sleep, tied him up in the ropes, got paint cans out, paintbrushes, paints this black guy white on TV, and people were outraged. They had to turn people away, had to call the fire department, the police department on that Monday night at the Boutwell Auditorium, at that time the City Auditorium, to turn people away. And people were totally incensed, and hardcore segregationists that would never cheer for a person other than a Caucasian were at the Birmingham City Auditorium, jumping in their seats, throwing babies in the air, cheering for Bearcat Brown and Lynn Rossi to beat these terrible people. And that turned the tide. Those two events just turned the tide. And I dare say there were probably others, but in my world, I'm familiar with those, and really changed the tide here in the South.
The outrage that the wrestlers received for doing that, I mean, it really just makes your blood boil. And then to see how Len and Bearcat Brown, the legacy they left behind, really changed the way you look at segregation and integration, and mixing the two races together, and look at how today I think you see more diversity than ever, in not just in wrestling but in all of sports and entertainment. So definitely that deal with Len Rossi and Bearcat Brown helped bring change to the South.
Oh, absolutely. And the outrage, was not short-lived. And I think that sowed the seed of where we needed to go as a nation and a society and as human beings. And like you say today, back then there was and I'm going to use an analogy here. Heat was black and white, and today heat is multi-diversified. I mean, anybody can get heat on anybody. Where back then, stereotypes were used quite a bit to bring heat in the wrestling world.
Yeah. Getting the chance to now transition from fan to broadcaster, how did the offer to work in Memphis Wrestling come about?
Well, in 1977 and 1976, 77, I had left WERC in Birmingham at 23 years old to become program director at WMPS in Memphis. And it was 680 on the dial. It was in a tough top 40 battle with WHBQ. They had fired the most popular radio personality in the history of Memphis, and Rick Dees. WMPS had fired them because he played his number one Billboard song, Disco Duck, on his own radio show, which Plow Broadcasting, which always managed to plow under radio stations in their history. Plow Broadcasting had a deadfast rule against that for whatever reason. And they fired him. And so they brought this little young guy in from Birmingham, this young whippersnapper, and it came into Memphis. Well, long story short, I hired a guy named Ron Jordan to do afternoons, who was good friends with Jerry Lawler. And in January, February of 77, I got to know Jerry, and from being on Ron's show. And when Jerry Jarrett broke off from Nick Goulas in March of that year, right place, right time, of course, didn't bring Lance Russell over from Channel 13 right away, and hired a guy to do the commentary that was the drizzling shits, as the wrestling world calls him. And he lasted a week. And Jerry came by the radio station, was on Ron's show, and we got to talking, and he said, "Why don't you come and do why don't you come and see if you can do this wrestling commentating thing? And they were holding the matches there early on, those first few weeks at the Cook Convention Center downtown, which was only 3 blocks from WMPS radio station on Union Avenue. So I ended up going over there and tried out, I guess you would call it. And they liked what they heard. And for 3 weeks, I did the show until they hired Lance Russell. And then when they hired Lance and got him on Channel 5 or over on Channel 5, then I was no longer doing the announcing. So speed up, flash into 1970, into the later of 1977. And got to be good friends. Well, 78, got to be good friends with Nick Goulas' son, George. And George would come to our Kicks 104 events. And whether they were at Flanagan's or whether they were, most of the time at a club. And George was on the prowl looking for a girlfriend and all that good stuff. So anyway, I learned, I got to know him, and he invited me to the matches one night. He said, you like wrestling? Come on down to the fairgrounds. He said, just ask for me at the door. He says, I'll come get you. So I went down there, and he said, you want to announce them? Want to do ring announcing for the first 2 matches? Sure. So got the information, did the ring announcing. And Mr. Goulas, his dad, took a liking to me for whatever reason. And the next week I came back, and he said, I want to try you doing play-by-play. You said you'd done some of the commentating for the Memphis bunch. He said, I'd like to hear you. So, again, getting that trial by right place, right time. And he said, if something happens in one of the events and our announcer has to get involved, you just take over. Well, the announcer was Tom Renesto. And it's been known to me, because I wasn't smart at the time, although I was, they just didn't know it. But unbeknownst to me, the angle was for Tom to get involved, and Tom got involved, and I grabbed the microphone. And from then on, I was Nick Goulas' play-by-play guy until the time he got out of the business.
Yeah, I mean, you got to work in different capacities in Memphis and Tennessee wrestling for a number of years. Uh, Walk me through kind of a day in the life. What's it like being an interviewer? Because it's different from being on the radio. You're on television. People can see you instead of hear you, but just hear you. But what was it like working backstage?
Well, first of all, as you can tell, I have a face for radio. So, makeup was important. But that aside, I think the biggest thing is to, again, listen. Listen to people back in the back when they were talking, or when, I had the distinct honor to work with a legend in filming and doing the interviews, and a guy named Randy West, who was, Jerry Jarrett's son-in-law, or not son-in-law, brother-in-law, and just a fabulous guy that had just a tremendous talent. His predecessor that worked and ended up going to Minneapolis was excellent as well. So you have good people to learn from. And again, listen, when they're saying, okay, this is the match, and this is what we're promoting, and this is what we want to go over. And then they never said, you may want to ask him this, because they realized that, that back in those days, nothing was scripted. So everything just came extemporaneous. And the boys were very good at it for the most part. And, they expected the announcer to glean from that. And I was pretty lucky. I was lucky enough to interview some really good people. I had a couple of folks along the way give me a couple of tips on the how-tos, Jackie Fargo being one of them, Tojo being one of them, Tojo Yamamoto, who was a brilliant mind, great wrestler, brilliant mind. And he would say, I think the first set of interviews I got probably the sternest lecture, not lecture, but advice, in that they said, you're standing there like a stick, relax, Well, I'm naturally stoop-shouldered. And back in those days, I weighed 133 pounds. And I always thought that Nick hired me to make his 175-pound wrestler look like a 225 wrestler. So that was the best advice I could get, was just relax and let it flow. I just took a deep breath and let it flow. But when you got the opportunity, and back then, the guys could talk right off the cuff, whether it was Jerry Lawler or Bill Dundee or Tojo or Jackie Fargo, or I can remember the first time I ever interviewed the what became the Fabulous Freebirds. Michael Hayes was 19, Terry Gordy was 17 at the time, and we were on set in Channel 5, the old Hee Haw set. They'd move all the background, and we had the desk, and sit there, and in the studio with me is none other than Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes. You'd start. Nick sort of had a certain way he started the interviews, and I picked up on it because he wanted me to do it the way he did it. So and getting to, you could just, they were nervous and both of them sweating like geese, but they were you could tell that they had the gift, and then of course we all know what they ultimately became.
Yeah, the best interviews I feel like are the ones that you have good chemistry with. People that you just interact with like right off the bat. Who have been some of your favorite interviews that you've gotten to do in the wrestling business over the
Well,
years?
natural. I mean, he can make any ugly guy like me look good, and then he's a natural. So without a doubt, top interview without a doubt. And always interviewed and always enjoyed interviewing Bill Dundee. I thought Bill was he could fire up and he could be serious. He could change moods. It was excellent. Billy Joe Travis. Billy Joe was an excellent interview. Eric Embry. I always loved interviewing Eric Embry because you never knew what was going to be said or where it was going. But probably my favorite of just personally to work with, and I had the opportunity to do some commentary with him when working for ESPN and the shows in Dallas at the Sportatorium, was Dr. Tom Pritchard. And Tom's a genius. I mean,
Hmm.
Tom gave me COVID and I almost died. So Tom and I are good friends. So, but Tom was always fabulous, whether you were interviewing him or whether he was a commentator or whether he was in the ring. I mean, I think he's probably one of the most underrated superstars in the history of the business.
Yeah, I mean he's got his own school now with Kane, training the next generation of talent, and
That's how I
he's
got COVID.
really.
I went up there. I had spoken at Bobby Eaton's funeral, and Tom was there, and we got to talking. And Tom invited me up to meet some of his. He had 16 wrestlers that they were training, and to sort of show them how to do an on-camera interview because they were teaching them the soliloquy, the one-on-one interview, but didn't have a lot of the when somebody was going back and forth with questions. So I went up there to do that in the midst of COVID and caught it. Didn't know it at the time. On November 30th, got put in the hospital on December 16th. Was told I was going to die on December 28th. Was God's grace, had a miracle and survived. And on my wife's birthday on Valentine's Day, was finally released back into the wild. So it was a really odd story, but a really happy ending to.
Yeah, that's so scary. I mean, was this before the pandemic happened or during the pandemic?
It was during the pandemic. It was.
Yeah, it's so scary like when you're dealing with an illness and with this virus when this first came out like everyone wanted to know more about it and it was a very scary time because we didn't know what it was and it's horrible to know when you have the virus, you're not able to do the things you love to do, and you're away from your family and your friends, and it's. I'm so glad that you were able to make a recovery and are still here today to tell your story, because uh, so many people can get this virus, and you just don't know what the future holds.
You're absolutely right. And by the grace of God and a miracle, I'm here. But, my dad was in World War II. And just a side story, because you talk about viruses. My sister and I never knew what he did in the war. I mean, he was in the Army for 5 years. We knew where he was stationed, but we never knew what he did. He never went overseas, never went in combat. And back in 1987, 88, I'm sorry. I was in Phoenix. I was programming KOY and Y95 and got a phone call from my dad in the middle of a Friday afternoon. Of course, heart jumps in your throat. Oh my God, who died? And he's on the phone, calm as can be. And he said, I said, well, why are you calling? And he said, well, do you get Life magazine? And I went, no, I haven't seen a Life magazine since it was on your coffee table when I was growing up. What it was this about? He said, go buy. He said, do they have newsstands in Phoenix? I'm like, Dad, it's Phoenix. Yes. And he says, go buy Life magazine. So I did. And I called my sister right away and I said, did he call you? And, yeah. And I said, did he tell you to buy Life magazine? Yeah. Well, I went to my assistant, Kevin Robinson. I said, let's get in the car. I said, I need to go to a newsstand. I got to pick up Life magazine. So, okay, so we go. And when I got out of the car and looked on the newsstand and saw Life magazine, and it was a black and white cover, it was a black and white cover with a mushroom cloud and dead cows in the field. And the headline was America's Secret War. And so I read it. It was about a 20-page expose back then. And I understood my dad was in chemical and biological warfare, but because he was sworn to secrecy, even when he left the Army, he never told anybody what he did. And then after the article came out, it was declassified over the next few years. My sister and I both learned what he did. And one of the viruses he worked with was the predecessor to the COVID virus. And it was incredible. But you're right about viruses. God forbid we ever see it again in our lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, so glad you were able to recover.
I got it's the only thing the only thing I think it did to me other than scare the daylights out of me and back to my faith was it made my hair gray.
Well, I guess that's a good thing. Gray brings out the wisdom.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, yes. All right. So, how long were you in the wrestling business for, and what made you decide to leave?
I don't know if I've ever left, be honest with you, because I get calls. Now I get calls for primarily for legend shows or shows that, are spotlighting the guys from back in those days. But every now and then we'll get a call. Ronnie West was a good friend of mine, the referee for Nick and then for Georgia Championship Wrestling for many years. And he promoted out of Chattanooga. And I still get calls from his son. His two sons still run shows occasionally in Southern Tennessee or North Alabama or East Georgia, North Georgia, or West Georgia rather. And they'll call me up and say, "Hey, we're doing so and so at a so and so. Do you want to do it?" And it's hard not to say. You can't say no because it's something you love to do. You don't say no to love. So every now and then, in fact, I did a show back last September. I look forward to it because I get to meet some of the new young fellas that have seen me on TV or have seen the wrestling shows that I've been part of on TV, on video. And it's fun to see the new generation evolve and develop. Although they are of a new mindset, that's okay because it's okay because everything evolves.
Yeah, I mean everything changes, but that's so cool you get to keep up with the business now, and there's a lot of incredible talent in all companies, both in on the mainstream level and on the independents. Who have been some of your favorite wrestlers that you've gotten to watch?
Lately,
Yeah.
well, that's a good question. I got to meet Tony at Jerry Jarrett's funeral in Hendersonville. Dave Brown and I were talking, and a guy walks up and says hello to Dave and says, "Hey, Michael St. John, nice to meet you. I'm Tony Khan." I'm like, "Wow." And he was very, 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 very courteous, very, very, very kind guy. And I liked him right away. I mean, he's just one of these guys that you like. So I could certainly tell or say why the boys would, be gravitated towards this guy. And wrestling today is very interesting. I think, and I'm going to MJF is that the call letters? I outstanding. I think he's in that organization. Will Ospreay, I think, is an outstanding talent. And of course, the boys that came through the WWE pipeline, I think, have added to that show very, very much. On the WWE side, who can you leave out? I mean, there's so much great talent. I think they have a major problem in that there's so much good talent. How do you showcase all of it? And I know they've got a lot of platforms to do so, but I still think that's a very, very difficult thing to do, Alex. And I wouldn't want to be on the booking committee, quote unquote, of the WWE, but it makes me appreciate Vince McMahon even more because he did it all on his own. And when you look back at the old promoters, the Jerry Jarretts of the world, and the Nick Gulises, and the Sam Munchnicks, and the Paul Bosch, and all those guys, how Bill Watts, how in the heck did they do it? I mean, it's incredible when you look at the product you see back then. Of course, there's more bells and whistles today, but the product back then and the product today are still professional wrestling. And you look back what an army of one did compared to an army of gosh knows how many. I mean, it's there's a lot of respect due to those folks.
It definitely is. And I think like there's so much wrestling out there today. I feel like there's no better time to be a wrestling fan with all the alternatives now that are out there. And I've said this before on the show, but it's way more accessible now than it used to be because you could go on the internet, you can go on YouTube and find all these different promotions and you could watch their stuff. It's fascinating how much content there is. And not all of it is on television. It's online.
You're absolutely right now, and you're right about the most options you could possibly have, unless you were living in the '60s in Huntsville, Alabama, with a community antenna, precursor to cable television. But there comes a point of saturation, and we see this in our radio business, and we're there. I mean, we've been there for a while, and to a point where one of the bands is probably, hopefully, going to go away in the AM band because it's every time a hearse goes down the street, the AM band loses a listener. So, in wrestling, I think you have to be careful. The entertainment value, I think, has to increase for the product to maintain its sustainability. And at what point does the entertainment version take over where the wrestling version leaves off? And I think it's a very fine line to draw and certainly to walk. And like I said, I admire what these folks are doing right now, but I don't think I'd want to be in their programming chair.
It's that happy medium you have to find. And like you said, there are talents out there that are killing it with what they're doing. So and I think MJF is one of those. Just he understands the psychology aspect of wrestling and showmanship, being a character, being a heel, like can play to a crowd. I mean, it's fascinating to me. Someone like an MJF is able to take that and run with it, and a lot of the guys today that are doing that right now, it's really awesome to see.
I agree with you, and it's a testament to those guys because they learned from the past. I mean, it just didn't happen. They learned it wasn't just osmosis. They learned from the past, and I think that's again they're listening and watching and learning. There are a couple of things that do bug me about today's wrestling. And that is, and I'll quote Jimmy Cornette on this, because back in the days when I was watching it and then got involved as a commentator and an announcer, it was all gone. It was all produced on the fly, if you would. It was produced in the ring with the boys talking to each other, the girls talking to each other, and nobody ever got hurt or rarely got hurt. Now it's all pre-scripted and planned and pre-produced and you practiced, and everybody gets hurt. I mean, people get hurt left and right, and it's sad. It's a shame, and I would love to see it go back to the days where people weren't getting hurt. But again, we're at a point in time one of the most popular movies of the last 20 years has been Jackass, and that should tell you something. So I think you got to play to the audience, and I think the audience I just graduated a daughter from high school, believe it or not, last. And my wife and I took this project on about 5 years ago, and she brought into our world. And my wife's 18 years younger than I am, but she brought into our world a new way of looking at things and a new way of how today's young people look at things and approach things and what they expect. And expectations is very, very high on their list. So I think we learned a lot. But the only thing I wish that there would be more time to develop storylines and plots. I think it gets rushed a little bit more so now than ever before. I see it more in AEW than I do WWE, but they're guilty of it as well. And I would love to see the storylines play out longer. But the other thing is, I would like it to be safer for the participants, because somebody blows out an ACL at 25 is one thing, but somebody that blows out ACL at 45 is another. And I really, it's concerning. It's concerning for the athletes, and they are athletes. They always have been. Maybe a little differently trained today than they were back then, but they're athletes, and they deserve the respect and the adoration they get from their fans.
No question about it. They put their careers, their bodies on the line for our entertainment. So they deserve to live a healthy life and be able to go to work and come home and travel safely. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. I want to switch gears now and talk about the stuff that you've done outside of wrestling and in the radio business. I know that you've been involved with a lot of charity work and have partnered with different organizations. What kinds of things have you done to help out in your community over the years?
Well, the biggest thing that we've had that has happened to our, and I've owned this radio station now for 28 years, is we had a tremendous tornado event come back through here in 2011. 256 people were killed on that day, on April 27th, and we went into immediate service mode in that we literally took all the computers out of the control room. We had a microphone, a telephone, and a live mic for a guest, and we just did information services for the next 6 days, 6 nights, nonstop. And anytime that something like that occurs in any of our radio stations, I own three in Tennessee with a good friend of mine, Steve Sudbury, up in Hartsville, Tennessee, and Trousdale County. We own the Fun Radio properties up there, and we do the same up there that we do down here. Then anytime that a need arises immediately, that is the wonderful thing about radio, is it can react immediately. Television, you got to have a producer, you got to have on-screen talent. There's a lot that goes into
Moving
radio.
parts.
Yeah, they're moving parts, and on a radio station, you open a microphone and start talking in a disaster event. So take a lot of pride in that. We take a lot of we keep ourselves prepared for whatever event along those lines come. But I'm big on kids. I'm just I had effects using hand gestures. It said moving my hands. I'm big on helping young people, and I do a lot of career days. I do a lot of things that are involved, whether in youth sports, whether it's I was a coach in Pop Warner football, 16 years in Gallatin, Tennessee. Also coached in Connecticut and Arizona and Missouri and here in Alabama. And any way you can help a kid. I mean, I'm all about the kids, and we try to help. Whether it be a young lady that's starting up a care or a cause for something, or whatever the case may be, we try to do it. I might have to plug this in. I'm losing my battery, so help me out. I mean, help. There we go. So that's the main thing that I do. I have a strong affinity for the uh, uh, folks that have pediatric cancer, and the St. Jude project is a very strong project that I've been involved with and supported for a long, long time. And lastly, at my university at Vanderbilt, there are a lot of young people at Vanderbilt University that don't have the means to receive the education that they're offered there, and they may get there and fall upon hard times. And I want to know the ones that are slipping through the cracks. I want to know the ones that need that hand, not a handout, but need that hand, and try my best to support any and all situations that occur in that. There are a lot of national organizations and local organizations that we support on the radio, but these things that I just mentioned are things that have personally affected me and touched my heart and my soul that I try to give back to, if at all possible.
Yeah, I mean, you have such a passion for helping kids that are going through stuff. They are the future, and you just never know what somebody might be going through, and you've been able to speak at these different functions. Was there like a particular event, whether it was speaking at a school or coaching, or a moment that you can recall that was just very heartwarming?
Oh, there've been a million. I mean, I could start talking now, and we could close this off at 5 o'clock this afternoon. That's there's one thing very personal of late that I will share with you. I have a grandson now for the first time. My son Cody is my wife's son by her first marriage, but my son Cody is a police officer in Huntsville, and he and his wife Katie had a little boy going on 6 years ago, Joshua, who is my life. I mean, I never knew. I always loved my wife, but I never knew. And I love my children, but I never knew I could love something as much as that. But he had he had an affliction called apraxia, and he was 3 years old. And this was right after I'd gotten over my COVID battle, and he couldn't talk. He could utter guttural sounds, and he would understand you, but he would point and would couldn't verbalize. And I reached back in my bag of and my history, if you would. Back in 2001, I had a problem developing with my vocal cords, and I was recommended by my doctor to go to the Bill Wilkerson Speech and Hearing Clinic at Vanderbilt University. So I reached out to the doctor that had taken care of me back then, back in 3 years ago, going on 4 years ago, and I told him about Joshua's situation. And he was so gracious. He got us in. They were, they had a 6-month waiting list, but he pulled some strings and got us in a couple of weeks, and we took Joshua up there. And for 2 straight years, every Thursday, myself or his grandmother on his mama's side would drive to Nashville every Thursday. And it's a 2-hour drive, 2.5-hour drive with traffic. And when they built that new exit on 65 South before you hit 840, it was a mess. But would drive to the speech and hearing clinic at Vanderbilt. He had a standing 1 o'clock appointment for 2 hours. He would be there, and then we'd drive home. And from February of 2021 until last March, a year ago March, we were there every Thursday. And the job that they did in their pediatric hearing and speech pathology division was miraculous, to say the least. And they know what they're doing, and they take the child, and every child, I saw probably 100 children during that period of time come through there, and every child is treated like they're treated like their own. I mean, when they take them back into the rooms where they work with them and teach them, and I mean, it's like turning them over to the other parent. And the work they did with Joshua, nothing's. I mean, he could say 3 words when we started the program, and now he was on the radio with me this morning on the morning show. He's 6 years old, and you can't shut him up. So I really try now very, very much so to support the efforts of the Bill Wilkerson Speech and Hearing Clinic at Vanderbilt University. And for anybody that may watch this program that has a child or even an older child that has speech or hearing problems, reach out to them, because the work they do is nothing short of miraculous.
Yeah, it's very inspiring, somebody that's going through a hard time, struggling, can't hear, has trouble talking, is able to have such a like you said, miraculous comeback, being able to have that moment where he can talk and speak and be on the air in front of millions of people.
And he's a wrestling fan, and that's even better. And we sat down and watched. Oh gosh, WrestleMania. I guess it was second night of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And he's asking a million questions, and I loved it. Funny a side note of this: I had to buy another car. I wore the other one out running up and down during Nashville. It's one thing to go up and down to your radio station up there once a week in Trousdale County, but again, you add another couple of trips a week, and you wear out a car in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's no better feeling than to have that bonding moment, and being able to celebrate something so special. Um, Watching WrestleMania, being a fan, and I'm sure you talked to him about your time in the business as well. So, it's got to feel good being able to put a smile on someone's face.
I never knew some of the videos with me on them are on YouTube Kids until he found them. So it's, again, find himself, he'll say, Papa, who is this guy? And he wants to meet Hulk Hogan, which I think is hilarious. I mean, here's a 6-year-old wanting to meet Hulk Hogan. So the next time that he's in the area, I've only met him one time, and that was the day I did the video, the day I wrote and did the audio for the video that was shot at Jerry Jarrett's house in the backyard, or in his ballroom with the backlit and the posing and all that.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. I'm sure that it'll be a great experience when it happens.
Definitely will be. What is it about giving back to the community that gives you the most joy?
Knowing that I'm investing my time and my experience and my finance into something that will always pay off. I mean, just the grace of God. It's you just feel good about it. It's just a grace that you feel, and you always pay it forward. If anything I can share to anybody is, help anybody. I mean, one of my favorite songs in Top 40 Radio came out in the 90s. It was called Mr. Wendell by Arrested Development. Mm-hmm. And it made people aware, or it was an awareness of homeless people. And you see homeless people, and it's too easy just to look at them and say, oh, they're a bum, they're worthless, or whatever. You're looking at a human being. And yeah, maybe he will take that $5 bill or that $10 bill and go get something that he ain't supposed to. But he's living his life, and he's a human being, and all human beings deserve to be treated as one. And, call me a softie, but that's the way I look at it.
Exactly. Well, Michael, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. It means a lot to me for you to come on to the show. Thank you so much for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find out more about you, what you're doing, and any future plans that you might want to share as far as what's next for you in the radio business and in the wrestling business?
Well, in the radio business, it's survival right now, because I think all radio stations are going through a period of time that it's tough to survive, and so survival is key. Personally, from the wrestling business, I always love doing these things. I always try to to do them mainly just to share stories, and maybe somebody might pick up a little inkling of information that might help them down the road, whether as a fan or a wrestler or as a person. So I always try to do it. And I really enjoy this. So many smart people and very talented people like yourself that are out there doing it. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm honored, without a doubt, an honor to come on and do it. But more so, as for me, what's next for Michael? Breathing. At my age, that's important. And as I say my prayers, I step out of bed every morning. I say, God, thank you for giving me another day, because we all are day to day, whether you're 10, 20, 15, 45, 72, whatever. It's everything's day to day. Enjoy the world, enjoy your surroundings, enjoy the people you're with and the people you get to know. And I look upon life as a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. What comes next, we shall see and we shall live. But, life in the meantime is a wonderful opportunity. I have a wonderful family. I have a wonderful wife who supports me just incredibly. And she loves her horses, which is her passion. And she works in the radio business to support my passion. And I donate money to her horses to support her passion. So, out.
Everything comes together.
Amen. And thank you for the opportunity and continued success. And I hope to see your podcast and whatever you do grow. And there's always an open door at our radio stations. If you ever want to come visit, whether here in Alabama or over in Tennessee, just give me a call, and would love to treat you to lunch and show you how we do radio.
I would love that. Thank you so much. And you're more than welcome to come back. We'll do a part 2.
God bless you. I'll be honored to do it.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.